Welcome to the Freedom Lover Show. Building a voluntary world, one relationship at a time. I'm your host, David James Rodriguez here, and I'm very excited for what's going to be happening in the next few minutes. We have a guest who I'm bringing on the show, and as I get this set up here, we have the technological ability to do a split screen. So that's what we're going to do here. If I can get Nicki Lynne on here and get here on here, request to be in the broadcast. That's right. Let's see. Yes. All right. Oh man, this is here we are. This is March 28th, Thursday, 2019, and I'm trying to get this set up, so we'll just lean back here, keep it chill. We're going to be talking about what's going on in Rockland County.
Okay.
And I have Nicki Lynne coming in here. Take your time, because as you guys know, as lovers of freedom out there, you understand that we are at a critical time. And let's get the audio here.
Oh my goodness.
And this goes even to forced schooling. You know, some of my friends out there who realize that I'm working with young people and parents out there for the forced school system, which I consider to be a crime against children. And so, I mean, and the forced vaccine. So, Nicki Lynne, how are you? Welcome to the Freedom Lover Show.
Hi, I'm so happy to be here. This is going to be great.
Yeah, it'll work. We got the split screen going here. So I think there's so much to talk about, but just going over through some of the things that we were discussing about, like what's going on in Rockland County. I don't know if people out there have saw the press conference. What's going on is that they passed this law, the county, that if you're not vaccinated, you cannot go to a public place. I am not making this up. You can go look it up. Take a look at their news conference that they did. The county administrator came out there and, you know, dressed in all sharp with all the people behind them. You know how they do their political propaganda. And it's just like, are you serious? So, and I'm in California. There's people in West Virginia. There's West Virginia and Mississippi that have mandatory vaccine laws. So I think this is kind of the wake-up call for humanity and for parents specifically. So, Nicki, thanks for joining us. You are a parent, and you're also the founder of foragingforfreedom.com and a freedom friend of mine. So if you would, share with some of the people, because you're an activist and been doing a lot of good work helping people learn about all the games that's going on, and, you know, where our rights come from, and all these really important conversations that now, thanks to the internet, we're able to have this conversation. So what are your thoughts on Rockland? And we can kind of start there and then meander wherever we go.
What a mess that is. I hadn't watched the little broadcasting that they did, but I did watch it right before we came on, and so I did take some notes. I thought it was interesting how they were attempting to turn neighbor against neighbor. In that, I don't know if anybody caught the wording of that, but they were like, you know, it's up to us to, like, hinting around to report if they know of anybody or whatever. But the main thing is that, from my own perspective, is that parents who choose to not vaccinate their children, I think that they, generally speaking, have combed over the information and have made a decision that is in line with their life. And so they understand that by having their child not vaccinated, that there is a risk that they will catch a disease like this. So they understand that risk. And I mean, measles hasn't been a deadly disease in the United States since, I think, like 6 years before the vaccine even came out. So to me, this hints at our innate immunity, and how, you know, the population of humans here built up an immunity as a whole towards this. And so this, to me, is a logical reason for the decline prior to the vaccine coming out. Now, they are attempting, I was interested to see how they would actually go about, you know, mandating that, or if you're at the grocery store or something, is a cop going to walk up to you and say, can I see your papers? You know, I really don't understand how all that's going to work.
Did you see that? Yeah, because like, so the county administrator went out there and spoke, and then that's like the first question they ask is, you know, how are you going to force these this law, and you know these politicians are snakes and they're slimy and they avoid the direct question.
Always.
And then he brings up the I think it was the district attorney or the county attorney, or all these games that they're playing are just ridiculous. And so when they asked him, "Are you going to arrest people?" I mean, this is on the press conference. Are you going to arrest parents? And they're like, "No, we're not going to do that. But we will refer them to the district attorney." So it's like, well, I'm not going to do it, the county administrator, but I'm going to refer him to the legal guy, and then he's going to do it. So I think, and this is a really powerful concept for me, when Ron Paul got his election stolen in 2012, I was a big Ron Paul guy. You know, he's championed the Constitution. And then I learned about a guy named Lysander Spooner. So, and this guy, I think he passed away in the 1800s, or I can't remember exactly, maybe 19th century, 1900s. Anyways, do you have some thoughts on Spooner? Because
I love
share
Spooner.
Some ideas that he had. Yeah.
I love Spooner. I actually have, well, I think I might hold off until we get more in depth into it to do my quote from him. But okay. He was ahead of his he was ahead of his time, or else he saw what was coming. You know, I think that when he wrote The Constitution of No Authority, I remember hearing in that book, I listen to a lot of audiobooks, so I remember hearing him say that the people who wrote the Constitution were like 20 to 40 years past. They had died 20 to 40 years prior to him making this book. So that just gives you a rough estimate of how long he was living, you know, in that lifestyle of being ruled over by the Constitution. And I highly recommend this. It's available on YouTube for anybody to listen to for free as a book on tape. And I usually listen to my stuff at 175 speed because I don't have the patience for like the regular speed. So you can really get through it. It's like an hour and 15 minutes, but you could get through it in a half an hour easy. And he really points out, the con that's going on, and he points it out really well. And so the con is this. The con is you were just born. I was just born. You know, we were all just born. Anybody born prior to when the people who wrote the Constitution died were just born here. And now we are being subjected to this set of rules that we're actually being forced under threats of government violence to abide by. And we actually haven't signed into a contract with anybody. At least I know I haven't. And so even if my mother did sign into a contract, let's say, with the government saying, I agree, the Constitution applies to me. I personally didn't. And so what the Constitution has essentially done is enslave every generation after it to, and not physically and literally because they're doing it by force, but we're not really enslaved by it because it doesn't apply to us. So it's implied that it does apply, and people just go on living their lives as if it does. But the problem comes when you're forced under threats of violence to do something that is in the Constitution, or do something that the Constitution has granted power to people, and something they decide. When they decide something that isn't best for your life and you're forced under a threat of violence to abide by that, that is a huge problem for me. There's no opt-out, you know? There's no opt-out. So.
Right. And if I could just add something, because as I'm doing my research in freedom and self-ownership, right, understanding that I own my life, and what Spooner helped me realize is that if I didn't sign the Constitution, how can I be bound to that, right? And so the Constitution is the supreme law of the land. You know, you have these state constitutions, but at the highest level, you have the federal Constitution, and then before that, you have the Declaration of Independence. So it's all based on contract law. And I want to read you a Spooner quote. Okay. Hopefully it's not the one you have, but this one says, he said, a man's natural rights are his own against the whole world, and any infringement of them is equally a crime, whether committed by one man or by millions. Whether by one man or by millions, whether committed by one man calling himself a robber, or by millions calling themselves a government.
Oh, exactly right. Exactly right. Yeah. Or voters, or, you know, I mean, it really does trickle down, because when you go to cast your vote and you think you're doing doing right. And this stems back to the education system, because they have implanted this in the minds of the children. And this is sort of a part of the indoctrination that you deal with as a young child growing up in the public school system. And you are ingrained to think that this is the only way or the right way or whatever, but you're automatically taught what to think about it. And so you have little leeway to think outside of that. And I want to read something that I wrote about one of Spooner's quotes that I just love, 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 because it really hits home. So here's this quote: "The Constitution has either authorized such a government as we have, or it has been powerless to prevent it. In either case, it is unfit to exist. It is not protecting us, in my opinion." And the Constitution starts with the word con, And so that, when I was doing the work, when I was doing work in the Mark Stevens court group, which is where I came across this information, it's where I came across Spooner, it's where I came across some extremely relevant information that people don't think about. And it's this: when you present the question to a police officer, to a judge, to a lawyer, and you ask them, where does my obligation to obey what you're saying come from? They either lie. If they're honest, they say, I don't know, or you have none, if they're honest. But what it comes down to is their ability and their willingness to use force and violence, which is unethical at its core. So this is what they're relying on to enforce these things like we have going on in Rockland. They're saying it in a passive way. Oh, we're not going to arrest any parents. Don't worry, we're not going to arrest any parents. We're just going to forward their information to the DA. That's a direct threat. That is a direct threat that violence will be used against you or your family, because let's say the DA picks up the charges, and let's just say it's a fine, okay? But you say, listen, I know that my child isn't vaccinated. I chose not to vaccinate them, so they have measles, so they got over it, or even if they don't have measles, I chose not to vaccinate them, right?
That's right.
And
it's not even the issue. It's my child. I'm the guardian.
You're right. You're right.
Not you, state.
And they're taking that out of the parents' hands, and they're doing it under threats of violence. So by saying I'm going to forward your information to the DA, that is a direct threat to me. Like, that's a direct threat.
Well, this is 100%. And this is why the state has taken over the school systems. Okay. So this is why it's so crazy. If you take a look at the work of John Gatto or Charlotte Iserbyt, and I'm just grabbing for the book here about the history of the school system. This is a book that I edited and published about the history of the school system. You can take a look at John Gatto online and the YouTube stuff. These schools were specifically designed to create obedient people who cannot think, right? That came from Prussia, Germany in the 1800s, because the military, they were shooting bullets at these young people, and these young people were running away from the bullets. And they said, man, we got to come up with a system where when we command these people to do something, they obey. We want to destroy their imagination and their free will. So this is like the progression of it all. And I think this is why many parents feel disempowered, is because they don't realize that they are an individual, whether you believe in God or evolution or nature, whatever it is, your rights, they don't come from the government. And we can talk a little bit more about going into court and other people out there who have these strategies to help them reveal that they are the bully, right? So, like, for example, my heart hurts for the parents in Rockland. So, like, I'm thinking about them, and it's unbelievable that the county would do this, that the state would do this, although we've been in California and other states, they're mandating vaccines. So it's just a matter of time, and people who aren't familiar with Carol Quigley or the Bilderberg Group, the Trilateral Commission, or Skull and Bones, or these criminal organizations, and I just can't say the whole of those organizations are, but definitely the center and the state itself, like, it's based on coercion. They get their revenue from the taxes. And again, like you mentioned, they're threatening violence, using coercion. So that means they're the bad guys, right? So mom and dad, understand your rights come from whoever you believe they come from, but they're not rights that can be taken from you. They're inalienable. And even just learning about that concept from Murray Rothbard was really, really powerful. But you want to talk about the court situations that you've experienced, or some of the tactics, or I can talk about when I went to fight my speeding ticket and my holding my cell phone while I was driving. There's a gentleman who I think you are familiar with, Mark Stevens, and I used his strategy to go into court, and he's fully up on Lysander Spooner and how, like you said, where does your authority come from? So because we're dealing with a criminal organization here, they've been compartmentalized, they've been brainwashed also, so they actually believe they have the right to rule over you. And so you know the strategy, I think, better than me, but I went in there with the speeding ticket, and I asked, where's the evidence that you have jurisdiction in this case? And I was very nice and respectable, and they didn't want to hear it. So I just kept pressing that, and I made motions to dismiss. Where's the evidence? And one of the guys, the judges, these administrators, he said, are you saying that the California Constitution doesn't apply to you? And I wanted to say yes, but it was like, his eyes, yeah.
Bulging, I can't believe, already. Everything's like short-circuiting, right? What is this? What's going on here? And that's the thing. And when I go to court, I don't claim. I try to make no claims, because that's the whole thing. I don't make any claims. They are the ones who brought the threat of violence to my front door. And so it's their responsibility to show me where my obligation came from, which they can't do. I mean, people are offering like $20,000 for the information, and nobody's come up with it. But that's the thing. I mean, I transcribed people's court hearings, and I listened to people go to court live with their phone in their hand, and I have just heard it all. I have heard judges go on long tangents. I have heard, when asked a simple yes or no question, because there's actually two forms of jurisdiction. There's personal, or there might be three, but I know there's personal jurisdiction, and then there's geographical jurisdiction. And what they try to do is they try to muddle the two. They try to say, well, you are in this specific location, and so the Constitution, laws, statutes, and codes of this geographical location apply to you. But it turns out this geographical location is just a legal fiction, because it's the victim. When you are speeding or something, it's always the victim in the case. But how can a landmass be a victim? They've created this legal fiction, and that is what they use to extort money out of people. And another really interesting quote I'll get to from Spooner in a second. Let me see, because it just hits home with this about what they've actually done here. So It's basically saying something along the lines of, if you have money, you can pay for soldiers. If you have soldiers, you can further extort people for their money. And it's a vicious cycle. And then we look back and we look how the Federal Reserve came about, how the Federal Reserve came about and what exactly that is, and how they print money out of thin air. And so you add that to the mix, which probably came after Spooner, because that didn't happen till the 30s, right? Wasn't it around the 30s,
1913, yeah.
1913, okay.
For like
they were
years before. Oh,
they
man.
were. But it just goes to show, the intermingledness of the situation. So they're printing money for free, borrowing it, paying for soldiers or cops or whatever you want to call, a whole plethora of different people that they are paying for with the money freshly printed that the taxpayers end up paying the gap on. And then they're buying these people off, and these people are then helping to further extort everyone else, right? Everyone else for a seatbelt ticket or for whatever. Now, I had a really interesting thing in my first appearance at Kansas, because they got me for no driver's license and something else. It was no driver's license, no insurance. And at the time, my passenger had marijuana and a pipe on them. And so there was a risk of him going to jail with me, and I had children. So I decided that's not going to happen. I just took his marijuana and pipe, and I claimed them as my own. Regardless, all of it's a victimless crime. They didn't pull me over for speeding or anything. So I show up at the first appearance, and so-called appearance, because that's a big part of it. It's legalese, how they're changing. They have multiple meanings for the words, and you use a word, and they try to entrap you into a contract just by your use of words. So, yeah, I go in front of the judge and I ask the prosecutor right there, like, what evidence do you have to present today that shows that I have an obligation to ever come back or to do what you say or to even be here to begin with? And nobody can produce anything. They said that doesn't come till later. That comes at trial. We don't have to produce that now. Well, why do I have an obligation to be threatened if I don't come back? I'll have a warrant, you know, I'll get my license suspended, like all of these things. How are you sticking me with that obligation without any evidence? You have no evidence. You're forcing me to be here. I ended up having to stay in that state for like 13 extra days. And, you know, I don't know what percent of Mark Stevens, the people who attempt his method, I don't know what percent are successful, but I have definitely seen success. I've worked on side by side with people who have had success, and we're not talking about little things. One friend of mine, Joe, he runs Cop Watch Hawaii, and he also runs a YouTube channel called Ethical Anarchism Articulated. He had the cops kick in his door for marijuana and take all his marijuana. This is in Hawaii. He wasn't supposed to be growing it according to their rules. And they ended up taking him through like 9 different judges. They couldn't pin it on him. And because he was so effective, he remained calm so much. He stuck to yes or no questions. And what happened is the judges ended up getting so mad, they walked off the bench, or they got extremely disgruntled and, you know, like threatened him with violence. And it looks really bad once they get in that deadlock with you, where they know, like, you paint them into this corner and then they know pretty quickly that what you're trying to do, I think, because I think that they, as far as I know, they are given pamphlets about it and they are educated on it. Well, if somebody tries to claim this is what you do, you know, like we're some sort of terrorist. All I want to do is live my life without being forced to do crap that the government says, you know, especially when it can endanger my life.
Did that interaction get on video or audio somehow?
The interaction with me or
with Joe, the guy when the judge walked off. Yeah.
It did.
Maybe you can post that here later.
I can post his channel, and he is good. I mean, he is really good at understanding and grasping the concept. And I'll tell you what, this is how I sort of found my path. I was going through, my son's father had taken me to court over my son. I know it's backwards, right? So he had taken me to court. He wanted to establish child support and establish custody and all of this on paper. I was like begging him not to. But what I was doing is I was going through YouTube looking for videos of how I was planning on defending myself. I was looking for videos on their terminology. I was trying to get real professional with it, you know, and I really wanted to do myself justice and my family justice. So I ended up coming across Joe's videos, and it was all of his hearings, one after another, but he broke them down. So he kept pausing it and pointing out exactly what the judge had done in this instance. Or, you know, highlighting certain parts where he asked a yes or no question, and then the judge goes, oh, bailiff, could you go blah, 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 and like starts having the side conversation with the bailiff that has nothing to do with his yes or no question, and then comes back to him like, all right, so this is what we're doing. We're setting another court date. And he's like, wait, you didn't answer my yes or no question. You know, keep having to bring them back to the yes or no question. Do you have any factual evidence that that you have jurisdiction over me, over my body, to tell me what I can do with my life? And that's really what it comes down to, is that nobody has been able to. And I worked in that group for 2 years, and I still ask people from time to time, like if my kids aren't with me and I see a cop in a parking lot, my first instinct is to go get my recorder on and go over there and say, excuse me, officer, I'd like to just ask you a question. You know, I was wondering if you are aware of any factual evidence that the statutes, codes, and Constitution apply to me. Just to keep getting responses, and see what they say. And I mean, I could post another video in the link to this thread of Robbie, which I gave to you. Yeah. And he did a really great job. He was the other person riding in the car with me that day. So he's the one who I took.
Yeah.
Now, he comes from a medically legal or a recreationally legal state, and that's where the marijuana was actually from. And so it's like, it gets pretty ridiculous when somebody gets in trouble facing 18 months in jail over carrying a dried up plant across a state line, you know? And it was...
Well, this is... Yeah, this, I think, the consciousness of humanity is awakening, Nikki. I think that's where there's a lot of hope. So despite all these tyrannical laws to force vaccines, got to, have to have it to go to school, and what's going on there in New York, like now we can actually have the conversation. And then, like you said, if you engage with the police officers, when I stay calm, they're pretty nice guys generally, but they've been brainwashed too, right? Like they think that they have some actual authority. So if they can learn or even be questioned and realize like, wow, I'm defending the elite class or the rulers, right? The political kind of overlords who try to make us do stuff. I think there's opportunity to have conversations. Of course, I mean, this is just the very beginning of it all. But what do you think parents should be doing out there in Rockland County? Because, I don't think there's any hope in calling up Ed Day, the county administrator, hey, change the law. Like these guys, these appear to be bought and sold politicians trying to work their way up the gigantic ladder, or maybe they want to get to the state assembly or whatever these characters want, but they are founded on immorality, right? Using coercion, threats, and intimidation. So we were talking earlier about like parents, if they could realize that they have a lot of power. And there's a guy named Gene Sharp. He has a documentary called How to Start a Revolution. It's really amazing. And he uses nonviolence. And he's been mentioned in the same conversation as Gandhi and Martin Luther King.
Okay.
And he basically helps. He's famous for his book called From Dictatorship to Democracy, right? So in that way, he's still kind of statist mindset. But I think his weapons, which are nonviolent, there's like 198 strategic nonviolent weapons that he recommends people implement. And I think parents need to realize you guys are powerful. Why? Because you outnumber them, right? And Larkin Rose's great video, The Tiny Dot, right, where like shows how many numbers we all are, and then the movement for freedom, and whether it's like voluntarism or straight anarchy or whatever the term is, we start to realize that the politicians, whether the Republican or Democrat, or I think I saw something the other day that it said like majority of people identify as independents, I think, or I can't remember if that was just the state or the nationwide, but it's like their approval rating is shit, right? Like these politicians, nobody trusts them except people who are completely brainwashed and haven't realized that they're in the donors' pockets, right? So I'm out here in San Jose, and my representative is supposed to represent 700,000 people. I'm like, how ridiculous is that concept? Nobody could represent that many people. So I like to say, I'll represent myself. I'm president of my life, my body, and I know you know that too, and other parents out there. If you can partner up with other community members, like I said, neighbors or people that are like similar mindset, because the people who are increasing their consciousness, like us and the people watching and the show here, we're the ones who are like taking humanity to the next level. And I think, if you want to maybe talk about like the future, what you see, but like, this is a gigantic, like a Titanic, which is, huge organization. There's huge money going on here. So it's like it's going to shift slowly, right? It's not like a quick shift, but ideas are bulletproof, and the idea of voluntarism is I'm not going to hurt you or your body and take your shit, your property, and you're not going to do that to me, right? There's this mutual respect of I own this body and flesh, and so do you. And whatever I create from it, right, the fruits of my labor, and that's it. And we will engage in voluntary exchange if we want to, using voluntary contracts. And if not, then we'll just go our separate ways, and it's totally fine. There's no violence necessary. And one of the things that you were sharing earlier about when you get pulled over And it was kind of like part of your story was,
Mm-hmm.
okay, he gives you a ticket. He says, we're all familiar with the yellow ticket. You were speeding, you were doing whatever, sign this ticket. It's not an admission of guilt. It's a promise to appear. And you're like, well, I don't want to sign that. What happens if I just drive away?
And don't
then
accept your
what's thought
magical,
process?
yeah. What happens to me if I drive away at this point and don't accept your magical piece of paper that you're attempting to, claim that I have an obligation to do something because you wrote scribbles on it? Like, what happens if I drive away? And the answer is went back to their car, they got stop sticks, and they put it under my tire. Like, you're not going anywhere. Okay, so you're going to force me to stay here? So is this kidnapping now? Because in any other case, with any other person standing there forcing me to stay in one spot, it's kidnapping. But then you put on the magical suit, of course, the magical government suit. And part of what is concerning for me is if you look at how many people are employed by the government in one way or another. I think the last time I looked, it was like 40% of Americans are employed by the government in one way or another. And so right there, that's almost half the people. So you wonder why so many people are in the dark still. And that, I'm sure, has a lot to do with it because they've spread out, gotten so big. And they've built a lot of jails over the last 20 years, but they haven't built enough to hold us all. They really haven't. And so banding together, and I'm up for ideas. I really want to get more women on board. This is like a passion for me. It's to bring women on board because I think women are responsible for bearing the children. In a lot of cases, they're responsible for caring for the children, especially if they're home educating them and everything. They have their children around them all the time. And we have to think about, as mothers of our children, what we are leaving to our kids. Are we leaving the next generation to be enslaved by this fancy piece of paper that, mind you, has been marked out a bunch of times and like written back over and, this doesn't apply anymore. We'll write this in. It's like, no, I don't want to pass that to my children. What I want to pass to my children is a small community of a safe haven, that is for the most part free. And even if I'm forced under violence to pay taxes on the property, I think that I would be okay with that simply because I would have the safe zone, but I want to create a community that utilizes the natural resources of the earth that they can't tax us on, and just live out my life in peace and freedom, freedom from their extortion, freedom from their coercion, freedom from their bullying tactics, and all of that stuff. I mean, this to me is the only way to live. Like, if my children decide they don't want to be there anymore when they get older and they want to go out and, enter into all that muck and mess that's going on, or go sign up and sign a paper, I want the Constitution to apply to me, I don't think they'll do that, but
Here's what's so powerful, I think, for me when learning about these ideas, right? Because like I said, Ron Paul was the Constitution, and then you find out that, no, your rights, your power to yourself comes from God or nature, evolution, whatever it is. You're born with it. You can't lose that. And so I call it not the final red pill, but the ultimate red pill is realizing that government is just organized criminals who fooled us and tricked us, and they take our money to use us to enslave us mentally and even physically. Like, I don't know if you know, this is the story of Muhammad Ali. Like, he was the boxing champion, and they forced him to go into the military. He said, no, you're going to go to Vietnam and, go kill people. And he said, nope, I'm not. And they took, I think it was like 3 or 4 years of his life. They put him in jail during the height of his career, the boxing champion.
Holy cow.
And this has happened in this country, right? And then you have
Why did I not know that?
The Japanese internment camp, right? This is in the early 1900s, right, where they gathered up all the Japanese people and put them in camps because of the risk. So as long as the government can control the narrative and conversation of like, oh, yeah, you're the dangerous one. So like what they're doing in Rockland, oh, you're the dangerous one because you don't have the vaccines. And and many of my friends know, well, if I got the vaccine, I should be safe from measles. So you're saying, so I got the vaccine and you didn't, so you're a risk to me. So their logic is all funky, and they use, like you said, the legalese of like crowd humanity or herd
immunity. Herd immunity.
And
Which
these
is
poor adults.
Yeah, it's a phrase they hijacked. I mean, herd immunity was observed in nature prior to Big Pharma hijacking the term. But now they make it out to be herd immunity can only be achieved by getting vaccinated. And that's just not true. The bottom line to that is that's not true. We have innate immunity, just, so it just takes getting the disease. But also I posted something on my Facebook for anybody watching. A friend of mine, Marianne, she created this list of reputable information, reputable studies and stuff that all point to the benefits of actually having measles, chickenpox, and mumps later in life, and how they can battle lymphomas, breast cancers, testicular cancer, and other cancers. So what they're finding is that the people who have had measles naturally and overcome it naturally which is, I want to add, a lifelong immunity, unlike the Big Pharma's immunity, which you need boosters for. And this could also explain why people are getting measles when they've already been vaccinated. I know when there was the West Coast, where was that, in Washington State? I believe more people that got measles in that outbreak were vaccinated than There was like 31 unvaccinated, and then there was 69 or something vaccinated. And so it's very clear that their vaccinations are not effective. And it's just, to me, it's outsourcing your immune system to a pharmaceutical company, and it's relying on them to keep you healthy. And all they care about is profit, just like the government. And they're hand in hand. They work together, they're buddies.
They're buddies, and I would say they're probably the same organization, and there's definitely profit involved, but I think there's more nefarious things happening. There's something called Agenda 21, and you can take a look at the Plan for New World Order. These guys, you look at the documentary called From Freedom to Fascism. The quote from Aaron Russo, firsthand conversation, was that Nicholas Rockefeller told them they want to put chips in people and RFID them just like you would chip your cat or your dog. And then if somebody dissents or they have a different opinion, they turn off their chip because the chip's connected to the money. And I was at a little bagel shop today, and I was getting some lunch, and I saw the Google Pay and the Apple Pay, and I always see those, but I really don't know what that is. So I said, "What is that?" They said, "Oh, we take the Google Pay." I said, "Okay, how does that work?" She said, "Do you have it on your phone?" I said, "No, I haven't set it up yet. How does it work?" Well, once you set it up, you just put it there like an RFID. And I said, "So it just takes it from my bank right there on the card?" Yep, I don't have to slide nothing. I said, "Oh, man." So we're that much closer to having a chip where instead of having the phone just go like this, you do your hand like this. So anyways, there's more nefarious things. And I heard another interesting theory of a gentleman I respect greatly. And he said, well, when you have the autism rate, it used to be 1 in 10,000. I think it's 1 in 60, or is it 1 in 38 now?
It's high.
And they suspect it's really high. It's not ridiculous. And I've seen the charts where they correlate, right? Of all the vaccines, it's like between 0 and age 6 now, the child gets like 72 vaccines, and just like 20 years ago, it was like 7 vaccines or 8 vaccines. Very, very low amount. So they correlate. Absolutely. And of course, correlation doesn't mean causation, but
until it does. Until it does, right? Until it does.
And I have some friends that are pro-vaccine, and that's fine. If you want to inject these products into your child's bloodstream, that is on you, and that's your own personal responsibility, and you got to deal with that. And maybe nothing will happen. I think I probably had a few shots growing up, but don't force me, right? That's the issue here, right? The issue is coercion. Yeah, threatening parents, hey, you better inject your child with this, or you can't come to the mall, or you can't go to the library, or you can't go to school. I mean, this is what's happened with school, but it's like the incrementalism, and these guys are out of control. So helping these parents realize that calling the senator, calling these guys, in my opinion, is a waste of time. There is maybe some voice, but it's like you got to get together. And what you said is having a community. And so I'm inviting all my friends who see this. I have a Facebook group called I think you're in there called voluntary
I
village
love
creators.
it. Yep.
Because I think that's what has to happen. And, you know, when the shit goes down and the police come in California or Texas or New York, like they're already doing New York County, right? That's the first county. And he's so proud, that guy.
He
that
was.
Day, we're taking a stand.
Yeah, and he's like, we're the first to do anything like this. And I'm like, and that's a proud moment? This is tyranny. This is tyranny right here. And what they've done, it's interesting to watch. Now, I have come across pro-vaccine people who are like, hey, my kids are vaccinated, but they hang out with unvaccinated, and I don't have an issue with somebody being unvaccinated because they're confident probably in their vaccine. But the issue comes with the mental gymnastics that you have to do, and that they put on the pro-vaccination community that says, well, if everybody isn't vaccinated, herd immunity doesn't kick in, and this sick person down here who's immunocompromised is going to get this disease. And so you watch out. If you know any of your neighbors, you report them if you know neighbors who are not abiding by this, because this is a very serious thing and we need to come together as a community. And it pins the people. It's the polarization, the hyperpolarization of the people. This is what it's all about. Divide and conquer, the oldest tactic in the book. And the thing about it is I may hear I hate even calling them pro and anti, but anti-vax people discussing the risks and things like that of getting vaccinated. But I don't hear them yelling at parents who vaccinate and saying they hope their child dies. And like, I've gotten the most bizarre comments aimed at me from the pro-vaccine community, you know, like, oh, you wanted to have an abortion and so you allowed your child to live unvaccinated. It's like, what are you even talking? What is that? Like, what is even in your head? Clearly no logic. So they've really done a great job at doing this weird mental gymnastics where they're convincing people who are for the vaccinations to be super against the people who don't want that crap injected into their children, you know, who don't trust, because the bottom line is this. The kids that are going up for the 72 doses in this day and age, they're guinea pigs. That has never once been tried in the history of humanity that we ever know about, you know? So they are absolutely guinea pigs. They have no idea. They have never done a multi-generational study on what happens to the community when they're injected with 72 doses of vaccines by the time they're 7. Never. Right?
Well, and then, yeah, it is. Then they haven't even done a double-blind placebo test,
right?
Which is like the gold standard for these testing these things. And then in 1986, they passed a law that said these vaccine manufacturers cannot be sued. Let me say it again. These vaccine manufacturers cannot be sued, protected by the federal government, which is empowered by the Constitution. So you're like, huh? So where'd you guys get your authority? They don't have any. They made it up.
It's
they
assumed.
Just have guns and they got weapons.
It's assumed authority.
It's assumed.
Yep.
So let me ask you this, my business friends and people out there who, I mean, we like making money, right? Like we like money and income, If I told you can make a product, and if the product hurts people, you're not liable, would you make less of that product or would you make more of that product? You're going to be able to make more of that product, and then you combine the combination with the health insurance, right? So there's another racket, right? Like that's why drugs, like the health insurance premiums are so high, is because the pharmaceutical companies are in there. So those guys are definitely in there for the money. But if you understand the whole cycle, you know, like there's no liability, autism is increasing, eczema, allergies, all these problems, and it correlates. So what I would encourage you to do is don't force me to vaccinate nobody, including myself. I'm not going to force you to vaccinate nobody. And don't force me to vaccinate my children. Are you out of your mind? I mean, even if you're injecting water, right? Like, here's my little cartoon of Dr. Pan or these guys. Like, I'm just gonna vaccinate you. You know, I'm gonna vaccinate you. It's gonna save you. It's gonna save you. It's like, dude, get your needle away from me, man. I don't want that. You know. So, hey, if you want to vaccinate your children, that's totally cool. If you want to eat donuts and do all that stuff, great. But don't force me to eat no donuts. Don't force me to take these injections into my body. Like, that's the main issue I want to help parents realize. And then what is the solution in this process is, I think, getting together with like-minded people and really taking your mind back from these organizations who have fooled you and tricked you to believing that you are loyal to them or you're a traitor, right? And so this is why in the schools they have flags. You got to do your flag worship every day, or pledge allegiance to the flag and to the republic for which it stands. And the republic is the state, right? And the state is a corporate document. You know, anybody, if you ever started your own corporation, you got to pay the money, and then you get the paper back, and then you get this envelope back from the state, and it says, now this is the corporation here. And I'm like, where's the corporation? It's a piece of paper, is what it is. And so that's what these organizations are. And once you begin to realize, and this, I think, a lot of people who believe in God, and not necessarily everyone, but many people, they're able to kind of realize, like, hey, you know, I'm born from God, and so my rights come from God. But on the other token, I think it's Romans 13, where it says, like, God puts the masters in place or puts the leaders in place, so you should yield to them. So it's just kind of this back and forth. But the idea is that we don't know where he came from, folks, or at least I haven't concluded. You know, there seems to be a creator of some kind, or evolution, I don't know, but we're amazing beings, you know, and we're able to think. We're the thinkers. We're the creators, and, like, your life matters, and your child's life matters. Like, do not hand it over to them because we say that you have to inject them with this ingredient. Well, I say you don't. And so I think even in the future, like in these little communities, I think, Nicki, like, we're going to, like, do our own Declaration of Independence and do our own little, I don't know, principles, or I don't know what the term is going to be, like maybe Constitution or something like this. But it's like, we all going to get together, because outside, these people have no clue that they are free. They're born free, and they voluntarily give that up. And, you know, just learning about this court stuff is interesting too, because, hey, of course, there's going to be more speeding or more like victimless crimes, and so people need to be equipped. Otherwise, you're going to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars or like go in jail for having a plant. So, anyways, I want to read something from the Declaration of Independence.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to say, where there's risk, there must be choice. You know, where there's risk, there must be choice as far as the vaccination thing goes. They cannot force you to do something that could potentially risk your child's life, and that there's clear evidence that it will. So.
Right.
Okay.
Exactly. Choice in general. Like, I mean, of course, there's always risk, but it's like, give me choice. And the choice is something we have to assert. So I think this organization has been reaching too far. And now mom and dad, uncles, aunties, grandparents, kids out there, are you going to push back? Are you going to assert yourself? And you can do that with your voice. And this is why the First Amendment is freedom of speech. So I think this is why one reason me and Nicki are talking, because it's so important that we talk and, you know, we become friends here. So the Declaration of Independence says, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men and women are created equal, and that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Meaning you have a right to your life, and no one has any right to put any product inside of you, regardless of what the paper says, right? Like, oh, I signed this, and now you have to take this product. You got to drink it. You got to inject it. No, I don't. And so it must be difficult for parents out there in Rockland. I know it's difficult for parents out here in California doing the forced vaccine. This is why I do consulting for parents to help them homeschool, remove their children from the school system. I'm working on a project called the Gatto Project to get these kids out of the school system, which is an acronym, Get All the Thinkers Out of the school system.
Nice. Now, what is it like? What is it like for the homeschooled children there? Are they still required under the law, statutes, codes, or whatever, to turn in their vaccine, whatever vaccines they've had? Are they required to have vaccines as a home-educated child?
Not yet, but I think it is in either Oregon. I think it's Oregon where they've done that. They have to check private or homeschool parents or families that they have their vaccines. But the state's coming. They've already showed their hand. You see, this is my issue. You know, when I started my expo a few years ago called the Education Options Expo, and homeschooling is one option. there's a documentary I recommend every mother and father and uncle, grandparent watch. It's called Summer Hill,
Okay.
2008. This is about a film, about a school from the United Kingdom. It's totally voluntary. It's a K-12 school, and there's no compulsory anything. And you show up, and they give you a menu of classes, and they say, here's our optional classes. Which classes do you want to take? And they can take all of them, or they can take none of them, or half, or whatever it is. So they show the movie. It's a really great movie, and they show the girl and the boy and the kid. One of the boys, he came from a really traditional public school, right? Forced coercion, no fun. And he said, no, I don't want to learn that, And they're like, all right, well, see you later. And that was like the teacher saying that, see you later. And so the kid looks over, and he's like, yep, all right. And so he like tiptoes out of class, and he's running around outside. Yeah, no school, no class. Because that's what we need as a young person, right? We got to feel that freedom. Mm-hmm. And then once we feel that kind of like, man, maybe it's around 9 or 10 or 12 or something like that, and you're like, I want to learn something, right? Like I actually am curious. How does this work? Mm-hmm. Stars or technology or whatever it is. Anyways, that movie goes through it, and it's been around for 100 years.
Wow.
This is what's so amazing.
Wow.
Yeah. I'm like, how come I didn't hear about that? Well, they have another school system in the U.S. called the Sudbury School.
Sudbury, I was going to mention that. Yep. Sudbury, huge fan, yep. Huge fan. Mm-hmm.
There's something called Agile Learning Centers. There's something called the North Star Self-Directed Teen Centers. Mm-hmm. So that's like 4 or 5, but these have multiple locations. If you want to open one, contact them. Let them know I sent you. They spoke at my conference. And so there's homeschooling and unschooling. And just so parents know, I distinguish between homeschooling and unschooling very slightly because there's something called school at home. And this is where mom and dad go get 7 subjects. They take it from school, and they put them on the kitchen table. Mm-hmm. Okay, that's school at home. Mm-hmm. It's better at home than at school, but I call homeschooling when a leader creates an atmosphere where personalized learning can occur. Mm-hmm. That's how I define homeschooling. Mm-hmm. And then unschooling is 100% self-directed learning.
Okay, and I tend to refer to what I do as home educating. I sort of drop the schooling part altogether because it doesn't really fit in with what I do. I have this whole idea in my head of schooling. It's this blocked out time. You do this, 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 and this. It's very coordinated, and, you have to raise your hand to go pee and all of that stuff. So I call what I do home educating. I know, right?
Yes.
Well,
it is. It's so...
I just have a mixture. I have an eclectic style. I tend to have about 3 hours, which we're in the habit of doing in the mornings, of having a more focused session. And then it's free for all for the rest of the day. Like, the learning does not stop there. We are a family that cooks together. We read the package ingredients together. We travel across the country and go to places, and the first place we always try to go to is their natural history museum, so we can learn about what is going on in other areas. And it's never a dull moment. I don't get grief from them. The 3 hours in the morning to 4 hours in the morning that is more structured, and I don't go with like a very strict lesson plan, and my daughter's 12. She has completely taken her education into her own hands, and I have overseen her, so I'm confident in what she's doing. Like, I'm not saying, oh my gosh, I let her take it into her own hands and she's just twiddling her thumbs in the corner. That's not happening at all. She is full force. We are at the library twice a week, and she can't get enough of reading, which I'm so happy about. And if anybody has any doubts that their child will attempt to take their learning into their own hands, they should get rid of those now, because even my 4-year-old, he just told me, I gave him a pop quiz on his alphabet letters, writing them upper and lowercase. He's 4. And he enjoyed it so much that he asked me to do another one. He's like, Mom, can we do another one? I really like that. I'm like, sure. Like, this is great,
That's right. Well, it is. Well, you're realizing it, and what's natural is we like playing games as young kids, right? And so when it's a game, it's voluntary, right? Like the worst thing you want to do is when someone like you're playing kickball or baseball and you hate that sport and they're like, you have to play with us. I have to, or you have to go to music class, or you have to do that. You're like, now I really don't want to do that. But it's like, okay, do you want to? And then, okay, well, let's do the pop quiz game, Mom, or let's do the math game. Like you can do multiplication games, right? So this is always a fun thing when I consult with parents is, so what about math? I say, yeah, what about math? Like when have you used math in your life? And if they haven't done engineering or accounting or these things, they haven't.
Never,
and so
right? Never.
They spend so many years, right? If time is more valuable than money, then forcing children to spend years is a crime against children to do pre-calculus, geometry, algebra 1, algebra 2, all these things, and they don't need those things. Basics is addition, subtraction, maybe some multiplication, maybe some division, but really, when do they need that in life? You really don't. And then guess what? There's something called a calculator, something called a smartphone, and what I find fascinating, like I liked math growing up, but then like they invited me to do some like gifted or something like that in junior high school, and none of my friends were in there. I was like, no, I want to hang out with my buddies, so I'm not going to do that. But math is interesting. Math is like an actual language, and it's it transcends like cultures and other languages like Chinese or Spanish. Like it's an actual language. So really, I think if the young person is given freedom to explore, then they will demonstrate to you what they're interested in, and then they will, like you said, they'll take up their own education and say, hey, what about this, Mom? Can we do that? And so that's what I help parents realize, that like learning is everywhere, right? So I'm principal of a private school that accelerates graduation and focuses on apprenticeships and internships. And the philosophy, I got two of them, main pillars, is the world is the classroom, and anything you can learn from can be a teacher. And so
I love
if
that.
parents can get that,
I love that.
They'll pull their kids out. Yeah. So you have a 12-year-old and a younger son, and they're both homeschooled and happy and doing well.
They're both home educated. They're doing so well. It has created this situation for me where I've had the freedom. I wouldn't regret any of it for even a second. We have the freedom to do anything we want on any given day. I know a lot, like in the beginning when I first started it was sort of nerve-wracking because you are presented with these state officials that you have to like sign papers to take your own kid out of school and stuff. And I knew less about the legal aspect of it then, or I probably would have given them more heck. But it has opened up so many opportunities for me to travel across the country with them and see so many places and meet home educating parents from Portland, from Denver, Colorado, and we go and we see how their learning experience is going, and we absorb things about it, and we take away what we like, or we don't take away what we don't like, and we make this whole design of learning based around what fits in our life and what fits for our family. And that is the perfect part of it, because then when they do find something that they're interested in, they can blossom in that. I was listening to this podcast. I did a podcast on Tuesday. It's not up yet, but it was for a home education, homeschooling, and a homesteading podcast. So I was listening to the one before me just to get a gist of how it would go. And the guy before me was saying what turned him off about the public school system. And it was that he was in 3rd grade. They were doing chapter books, and he hated reading. But he got this chapter book, and for whatever reason, it really resonated with him. And the assignment was to read 1 chapter. And so when he started reading the chapter, he loved it so much that he read the entire book. And when he goes to school the next day, the teacher said, "Did everybody read their chapter?" And he said, somebody who doesn't like reading is so proud that he read the entire book in one night because he knows he doesn't like reading. And the teacher says, "You didn't do the assignment," and gets upset with him and punishes him for not following the rules, which just goes to show you it's not about, your ability to learn and absorb and take in information. It is about you obeying. That's what it's about. If you don't obey the rules set in place, and they're only indoctrinating people, humans, to follow that later in life. If you don't obey, you will be punished, you know? And so they're doing it at very early ages. And he was in the 3rd grade when this happened, and I can't even imagine. He said from that point on, he knew that it was a joke, that learning wasn't the bottom line, that falling in the line was the bottom line, you know? Do as I say. So. That's
right. Well, I have to add on to that because, I mean, spending 12 years in the school system is torture for about 80% of the people. 20% of the people actually like it. But, I mean, think about it. Just so you know the numbers, in the U.S., it's over 50 million minors in the school system. Tomorrow's Friday. They're going to be forced to go there. And worldwide, it's over 600 million. And they're all copying this model from Germany, as you mentioned, to get permission and to obey. This is exactly what they've done. You can take a look at B.F. Skinner's work, who did operant conditioning, where you can see the video of them teaching a pigeon to read. So it says turn or stop, right? And so they use food, which is called positive reinforcement, or they use penalties, which is negative reinforcement. And there's video of this guy saying, we'll use recess, we'll use detentions, we'll use lunch as reinforcement tools for animals, but animals meaning children.
Wow.
So, and this is, 50 years ago, B.F. Skinner. And so this is why I have to tell you this too. That right in California, it's age 6 that they mandate attendance. And they're trying to get 5, they're trying to get 4, they're trying to get 3. The state wants your children, mom and dad. And this is what's happening. So really, whether you have a 2-year-old or an 8-year-old, I strongly encourage you to begin learning about these things. I got a homeschool group called Homeschool Leader. It's a Facebook group. You can take a look at that. Get some support. Get some inspiration. Get some ideas, because you can do this. And the schools try to trick you to thinking that you can't do it. Right? So it's like self-doubt, and you feel like, what's all the paperwork, what they're going to do. And I want to read the law here, and I'll give it back to you here, because once I saw this law from California, which actually, the parent can be fined up to $2,000 and imprisonment for a year. I just want to read it just so that parents can look it up for themselves, because it's ridiculous. Okay, this is the Education Code, Section 48260A. A pupil subject to compulsory full-time education who is absent from school without a valid excuse for 3 full days in 1 school year, or tardy, absent more than 30 minutes, shall be classified as a truant. Okay, that's the definition of a truant. 30 minutes late.
Unbelievable.
3 times a year, okay? Okay, next one, Education Code Section 48264.5. The 4th time a truancy is required within the same school year, the pupil shall, within the jurisdiction of the juvenile court, which may adjudge the pupil to be a ward of the court. So if you become a truancy 4 times, the state says, we're going to take your child, become a ward, potentially. Okay? And that's the penalties for the student. The penalties for the parent, under Section 48293, Penal Code Section 270.1, a parent who has failed to reasonably supervise and encourage the pupil's school attendance, and who has been offered language-accessible support to address the pupil's truancy, is guilty of a misdemeanor punishable by a fine not exceeding $2,000 or by imprisonment in a county jail not exceeding a year.
Holy crap. I can't even with that. I can't even.
Well, here's the crazy thing, Nicki, is if you look in Texas or Georgia or Florida or North Carolina, South Carolina, Iowa, they all have mandatory attendance policies.
I know.
And if you look in the education code, it's all backed up. So this is what's so scary about the mandatory thing in Rockland, is that now they're saying, well, now you can't come out of your house unless you have the proof that you've taken these toxic chemicals in your bloodstream. So I just want to encourage parents that you don't need these politicians' permission. They need us. And there's also a quote by Etienne de la Boetie, and he talks about how there's like a colossal statue and like it's a huge statue, and it's this dictator mean guy. And it's like, you don't have to like go fight him. All you have to do is remove your support of this statue, right? So if you imagine like all these hands are holding up this dictator, this government, the state, you don't have to go kill him or use violence. We're peaceful, loving people. We're the freedom lovers. We're peace lovers. We're voluntary-minded people, voluntarists. This is who we can associate with. We don't got to do nothing. We remove the support. And then the statue, or he calls the Colossus, falls within its own footprint. And then it's over. So, again, take a look at Larkin Rose's tiny dot. You are powerful. If you are hearing this, you are alive. You are not dead yet, right? We're all going to have this, life experience. Hopefully we live to be 100, 120. But you are a sovereign individual, freedom of spirit, of flesh and blood. They need your support. So what I would do, like you mentioned, gather up with some of your lady friends out there, or guy friends, or children, and get together and start having a conversation about, I would say, the two principles, really important. Self-ownership, okay? You own your body, you own the fruits of your labor, and then non-aggression principle, which is I'm not going to aggress against you or your property, and you're not going to aggress against me. Those were the two fundamental principles that really helped me understand, like, I don't need permission to do something that's voluntary, something that I'm not harming somebody, or I'm not hurting them or trespassing or doing something on their property. Like I'm a free person, and if you invite me there, then I'll be there. If not, I'll leave. Not a problem. I'm not going to force nobody to do nothing. And so, anyways, I had to read those education codes because it's so mind-blowing.
It really is. It really is. Oh my goodness. I mean, that's basically that is them telling you we own you and we own your children, and we will tell you and your children whatever to do. And then when you bring it back to the court thing and ask, well, where is the factual evidence that I have an obligation? And it's missing. It's missing. So it's so mind-blowing. It really is. It's like, that's why I just want to create my own little, like, tiny, well, it doesn't have to be tiny. Hopefully it's big, and hopefully there's a lot of people there, like-minded people with me,
Yeah, so what I would say is let's dream big. Let's play big. If you haven't got into Bitcoin or cryptocurrencies or other things, there's financial opportunities there, I'm learning about Forex trading as well, the largest market, financial market is $5 trillion a day, right? So there's ways to earn money. We're talking on the internet right now for basically free. So there's opportunities to either earn an income from home, so you can remove your kids, you can get trained how to homeschool your kids, and you see this organized criminal organization coming down in Rockland County. It's already in California. It's already in West Virginia and Mississippi, Oregon. I mean, ladies and gentlemen, they're not going to stop, right? So what I would encourage you to do is find hope, find some conscious people, some conscious friends, have a conversation. And I was talking to you, Nicki, about Anarchapulco, and Anarchapulco is the event of the year for me, and I invite you and everyone listening to come down to Acapulco for a few days or a week and come on the beach and learn about these ideas and speak with conscious people who aren't going to say, oh, you're just making these ideas up. It's like, dude, I gave you so many resources here, and so did you, Nicki. So if somebody really wants to learn, they can just watch this video. However, it's nice to do it on the beach when it's 78 degrees out, and you can walk 2 minutes down to the ocean. Or guess what? There's an event in Arizona, Sedona, Arizona, tomorrow.
Oh, wow.
Michael McGillicuddy's putting an event on. There's an event in Philadelphia, Narcadelphia. I think that's in May or June.
Okay. Well, we're planning an event. We're planning an event for Gainesville, Florida. That's going to be April of 2020 is what we're aiming for. And it's going to be the same thing. It's called Agora Fest. That was the last I heard, although somebody up in North Dakota, I think, had the same name, but I don't feel like they're going to be upset about it because of the ideas. We want the ideas to spread, so the name might be changed, but I'm not sure at this point. But we are trying to do something locally for the people who can't make it all the way to Anarchapulco, who can't afford the tickets to go and stay at the hotel or whatever, but still trying to gather and for the purpose of spreading information. So that anybody, I'll keep posting on Facebook about that, and that's going to be April of 2020. And I've sort of been given the job to help recruit, you know, speakers and to help organize it a bit. So it's just all of my dreams have been chasing me down and forcing me to believe that they are now my reality. And I am so glad to be on a path where I can actually help change people's lives and their views, and for the better, you know, to better themselves, to help them realize how powerful they truly are, because we are powerful. We are powerful as individuals, and we're really powerful in groups. So, yeah, I'd like to get more women on board. If anybody's interested in this gig coming up April of 2020, they can always reach out to me on Facebook. I posted a bunch of relevant information that we talked about already to my Facebook page. So if anybody wants to go there and view it, specifically the information about measles and how it can benefit, how contracting measles naturally and fighting it naturally can be beneficial to you. And then when you look at cancer as being, you know, a however billion-dollar industry, and you realize that catching something like measles or chickenpox can help you battle cancer later in life, you really start to wonder what the heck is going on here, you know? And then on top of that, how there have been reports of the canine kidney or the monkey kidney that they use to inoculate to grow the virus. Basically monkey virus that is only in apes and monkeys now has been implanted into 40,000 or however many thousand humans here in the United States, because it was grown in a monkey kidney that had this monkey virus that's natural for monkeys but not for humans, and now they're finding it embedded into cancers in humans, in human beings. It's the SV1 through 40 virus. There's 40 different ones, but SV40 is the most common one that's being found embedded into the cancerous cells of humans. And so you just have to wonder, not only are they preventing us from battling cancer naturally ourselves, but are they actually injecting us with it? You know, even if they don't understand and know that. So it's a very crazy thing.
I was going to say there's a lot of good people in these organizations. You know, a lot of my family members are either retired or currently in the school system, and I have friends in the medical system, even family in the medical system as well. Smart, loving people who've been compartmentalized. They don't understand that there are predator humans out there, and that's a really big pill to swallow, to understand there are humans like the Rockefellers, the Rothschilds, these guys who they don't need any more money. They want absolute control over humanity. And so when I see what's happening in Rockland, in California, all these places, it's pretty clear to me to see what's going on. Mm-hmm. It's organized crime. That's what's happening. Mm-hmm. These guys they're tyrannical people, and you know, they're using the good hearts and goodwill of nice people like my family, maybe your friends and my friends too, mm-hmm. Who got to have an income. They got to make some money. But you mentioned the SV40 virus. I've looked into that too. Even like, where did HIV or AIDS come from? Very mm-hmm. suspicious. Mm-hmm. So imagine if you owned a hospital or you owned the pharmaceutical companies and your buddy was the head of FDA or whatever it is. It makes total sense why you would do this, right? You mm-hmm. would use this apparatus to benefit you and benefit your children, right? And this is why in the book called Understanding Our Slavery by the new Etienne de la Boétie, he says, the state is intergenerational organized crime. Mm-hmm. And that really awoken me too, to like, wow, it's not just a 5-year stint, you know, what's going on the last mm-hmm. 5 years in California, but they've been doing this a long time, the military industrial complex. And
terrible.
You know, so we got to understand what it is. And then what do? You know, like we said, group up, find some healthy friends, or mm-hmm. you don't have to be healthy if you don't want to. Do whatever you want, but don't aggress against people. You know, these basic principles, and go to some of these events. You know, and I'm so inspired to hear about Agora Fest, and I was just learning about agorism. Why don't you tell some of the people what is agorism and why it's so important for freedom for the future?
My understanding of it, and I'm sort of just getting into it, I sort of came in the anarchist way, and then I sort of switched over to voluntarist because I feel like it's a softer word, but they're one and the same to me. So I've just sort of been introduced to the concept of agorism, but what I understand about it is that it's an economical stance against what is being done. It's making economical moves. So things that would fall under that umbrella would be things like avoiding taxes or bartering and trading with people as opposed to utilizing Federal Reserve notes, things like that. So it's taking an economical perspective on how to battle, you know, this tyranny, how to live your life outside of operating within their system from an economical standpoint. So, yeah, all of that stuff is in there. I mean, everything ties together. And pretty much for me, you know, there's all these things. There's all these things of how they rig the game. There's the education, there's the health, there's the monetary system, there's all these things. But one thing that connects them all, media. And the one thing that connects them all is the law. That's the one thing that connects them all. That is how they get all of those fingers. You know, the law is like the palm and it's controlling all the fingers. And that's how they get you to think that you are forced to send your child to a public school, or you're forced to inject your children with neurotoxins, or you're forced to use Federal Reserve notes and not make your own type of money, you know? So it's really that is the core of it. And that is the most important thing, I think, for people. Mothers, please realize that there is no factual evidence that you have an obligation to do anything that any government official says. If there is, I haven't seen it. And if anybody does have any, I would love for them to post it in the link and I'll split the 20 grand with them. Okay. So if they do, you know, I believe it's Mark Stevens himself, but I know somebody else offering money for it. So if anybody does come up with factual evidence that any of us have an obligation to obey any, you know, law enforcement. I mean, we know that they have violence on their side and they have cages that they can throw us in. So that's a given. But other than that, do they have any other way to tie us? Because that's all unethical force being used to get us to obey, right? So that's the core. Once you understand that, I think it makes everything else easier. And if you're just coming into these concepts, it can be overwhelming and it can be hard. I know I went through a very sad period for a while when I started really, truly understanding this, understanding what was going on, seeing the hugest picture ever. It was scary because it's like, how do you battle this huge organization? This thing has a stranglehold in so many aspects of my life. And you're just kind of dumbfounded by it. And it's like, well, where do I turn to now? You know, but there are people to turn to, and you can ask for, I mean, I home educate. I am more than happy to discuss how my day goes or discuss where I get information that I use in my curriculum, any of that. I'd like to come up with my own curriculum at some point if my plate ever gets cleared of all these things I have going on. But yeah, I just don't be scared. Don't be afraid. The entire situation is run on fear. So when you let that go, there's a world of possibilities out there. And when you gain the fundamental understanding that nobody has the right to tell you what to do, you don't have an obligation to listen to anybody, and then stand up for that right, because I'm a firm believer in the only rights you actually have, whether they're God-given or not, are the ones that you stand up for.
That's right. And so, you know, it's so important for parents to realize, and people realize, that unless you signed a contract, how can you be obligated? And so that's what's so funny about the Rockland County administrator when he said the authority comes from the law. The authority comes from the law. And what that really means is, AKA, we got the guns and we got all these order followers who are going to do what we say because their income and pension depend on us. And I'm sorry to say it like that, but that's what I've seen, is that a lot of people just depend on the economics of it. Mm-hmm. So the authority is you, right? Whether you believe in a master creator or nothing at all, you're the authority. You have a life. You have rights. And this is what Murray Rothbard said, is that rights belong to the living, not the dead. So the people who sign contracts, 50 or 100 or, 200 years ago, if they're dead, they don't have any rights because they're dead. You're a living being. Your child is growing up in this world. And the great quote is that the children are not inheriting the world from us. We're not borrowing, the children are not inheriting the world. We're borrowing it from the children. So this idea that the children are so important, it's really true. This is why the politicians use it and they pull on the heartstrings. And so you got to step out of that and realize that that's a political control and messaging and branding. And the awakening is happening. This is the best time to be alive in human history, to connect with people, whether it's freedom or whether it's technology or whatever it is that you're interested in. You can find that person online, whether it's Agorafest or Narcopoco or Narco Arizona or Narcodelphia, or you're going to start a conference, as I did and many people have and done. People want to get together, right? You know why? Because the technology is nice. It's great to see you on the screen, but it's nice to go, have a drink with somebody, or go swimming with somebody, or go play some basketball, or go golfing, or whatever you do in your free time. We're humans. We're meant to have a life and have a great experience here. So I just want to thank you, Nicki, for taking some time out to talk about some of these really important issues. I think there's going to be more, and the state is out of control, what they're doing. So let's keep having these great conversations with other people out there. I have a Facebook group called Homeschool Leader. You can join the voluntary village creators. You can join. And Nicki, you have your website, foragingforfreedom.com. If you want to share any last words before we cut loose, feel free.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you so much for having me. The website does have a lot of the information about CORE on there. It's basically split up into two sections aside from the blog, and it is The Game is Rigged. It goes over all of the different aspects of how the game is rigged against us. And then it has a counter section, which is meant to be things that you can turn to counteract the riggedness that's against you. So, for instance, with the monetary system, it would be cryptocurrency. With the big pharma, it would be natural things. So I tried to make, because when I got into this position of realizing how sort of messed up it was, I wanted lights at the end of all the tunnels, So I tried to make it a little bit balanced, and then I do have the blog, but almost everything we've discussed is on there. Anybody can go look at it. And I just want to say thank you so much for having me on. I think this is so great. I would love to do this again. And any ladies, I'm on this mission right now to get girls on board with freedom. I mean, I didn't realize it would be such like a difficult thing, but if any women, ladies, moms, anyone, even men, I guess, but I sort of get that a lot. Any women who want to come get a hold of me and ask me how I do it or anything like that, I will be more than happy to talk to them and more than happy to explain that it's not as scary as it may seem at first.
Absolutely. So important. I got to make this last little story about Sharon, Mexico, where they've been living stateless for 8 years. And it was the women, the mothers, the grandmothers, who rose up when the government was getting out of control. They kicked out the politicians. They kicked out these giant corporations who are colluding with the government. And it was the women who started that. There's a city of over 18,000 people.
Wow.
You can look at YouTube about that as well. So inspiring. I told some of my Freedom Lady friends, you guys are important, right? There's a lot of guys because like we're independent and stuff like that. But women, we don't just want you. We need you in the movement. If you see what's happening in Rockland, in California, all around the country and around the world, we're looking to you for help. And also, we're looking in the mirror too. Everyone's got to rise up and do the best that they can with the knowledge, the awareness, and the consciousness that we have. And I believe freedom's going to win. I believe humanity's going to win. That's one reason I have the show. The other reason I have the show is to connect with people and have conversations like Nicki and I just had, because I think it's going to be phenomenal to see how this transpires. I think homeschooling is going to blow up. I think these festivals are going to grow up. Independent self-sustainability, self-reliance is going to blow up, because we don't want this world, the people that are conscious, we don't want it to continue to go this way. And even like Tesla talking about free energy 100 years ago, it exists. And I think the young people can help rediscover that and grow it. So thanks for tuning in to the Freedom Lovers Show, where we're building a voluntary world, one relationship at a time. I'm your host, David James Rodriguez. Thank you, Nicki Lynne, for joining us.
Thank you.
Audience, for watching. And we'll see you next time,
Thanks
whenever
so
that
much.
is, Freedom Worldwide. You bet. We'll see you guys.
Bye.
Bye.